Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my journal. I am going to talk briefly about the civil case that Donald Trump is involved with. He is being sued by E. Jean Carroll. It's taking place in New York City, and both the plaintiffs and the defense have rested, and the jury is deliberating. So I want to get this in before we know the verdict. I think the verdict might very well be for the plaintiff. That is, Donald Trump is going to be responsible for renouncing his earlier claims against E. Jean Carroll, and he might be responsible for a lot of money. We will see. But I want to talk about why I think this type of case is fraudulent in itself, and that's a more complicated argument. And I want to also talk just about the immediate political fallout from all this. So I will start there. Whatever the verdict is, this case has been an absolute disaster for Donald Trump personally, for Trump world, etc. The chickens have finally come home to roost with the grab 'em by the pussy tape that, of course, was revealed in 2016, an October surprise, and was damaging then, although Trump pulled out a miraculous win. And I think this is a point at which, again, the chickens have come home to roost, that Donald Trump is ultimately having to pay for those comments, because I do think that this is a political case. It's being done by Roberta Kaplan. It's being funded by Reid Hoffman of Netflix fame. And it ultimately derives from what was a political act and not necessarily a criminal act. That is, it ultimately derives from the grab 'em by the pussy tape. And it doesn't necessarily derive from a crime. And I think that's the real problem. And that's why I think everyone, no matter how you feel about Trump, I was famously very excited about Trump at one point. I'm much less so now, to say the least. But I think someone should take his defense on this matter, in the sense that this type of case is fraudulent in itself and could be misused in a whole host of different ways. But anyway, let's get back to the immediate political fallout. Trump never took the stand. You don't have to in a civil matter. And he didn't even show up in court. Again, you don't have to in a civil matter. He did show up via videotape of his deposition, and the highlights that we've seen from that deposition, which I'm sure was, hours upon hours, but we're only seeing a few minutes here and there. Anyway, those highlights are disastrous. And I agree that they might be funny on some level, but they are super disastrous. And I think Trump in many ways couldn't help himself. He just had to act like an edgelord and say these things. It's part of his personality. It's in a way what made him great and what might very well bring him down. So just some highlights of these. He misidentified E. Jean Carroll and his own ex-wife, Marla Maples. So he was shown a photo in this deposition, and he first off, there was an odd way in which Trump was either playing dumb or he's having serious memory issues. He couldn't quite remember, when he was married to Ivana, when he was married to Marla, when he was married to his current beautiful wife, Melania. And he was shown this photo, and he said, oh yeah, that's Marla. And he was corrected. No, that was in fact E. Jean Carroll. And they're different people, but they look fairly similar. So his claim after this accusation was made was basically the same claim that Sorghum of Akkad made, that is Carl Benjamin, on Twitter at some point, where he said, "I wouldn't even rape you," which is, I guess, a backhanded compliment if there ever was one. Very, very much an edgelord comment. And he said that, "Oh, she's not my type, so I wouldn't sexually assault her." Well, again, that's a very odd thing to say, as opposed to just a blanket denial. "No, I didn't do this." That would have been a lot easier, but Trump had to kind of twist it. Well, it seems like she very much was his type. He thought she was Marla Maples, in fact, whom he had a long-term affair with throughout the 80s. It was played out in the tabloids. I can remember as a kid going to the supermarket and seeing People magazine and, Trump and Marla and Ivana and all this kind of stuff going on. So that was a huge disaster. The other thing, he said something that was truthful, but obviously doesn't really serve him. And he said that he basically affirmed the grab him by the pussy tape, because, a lot of people listen to that tape and they said, "Oh, look, he's confessing to a sexual assault." Well, it was locker room talk in many ways. He was talking very generally. He was not confessing to a specific crime. But there's also this interesting quality to it where, it's like, okay, is he being offensive? Yes or no. But is he right or not? Yes or no. And he affirmed this, that for the last million years, if you were a star of some kind, I guess a star in the age of the cavemen, you were really good at clubbing the other tribe or something. Basically, they let you do it. And so it's a comment on female nature and not just man's nature. All of this might very well be true, but it's just not the thing to say in a deposition. And so I think that also was a disaster. So again, even if he gets out of this, even if he wins on appeal, I still think this is highly damaging. But I want to talk more about the case itself and why it's fraudulent. And I think it's not necessarily being misrepresented by the media, but it's being misrepresented in headlines and how people talk about it. So it's often referred to as the Trump rape trial. Well, it's not a rape trial. It is a defamation trial. So we're distanced already by a valence away from the actual alleged crime. The rape, or it sounds a little bit more like a sexual assault to me, but I don't want to split hairs here. But the crime occurred in the mid-90s. Trump's lawyer made something of the fact that E. Jean Carroll couldn't quite remember when it happened. Was it 95 or 96 or something like that? Well, I think that's actually fair. I was in high school in the mid-90s, and, did this event happen senior year or was it sophomore year? I can't quite remember. I think that's fair. And I also don't think E. Jean Carroll is making it up, actually. And I'll go into more of that a little bit later. But what happened, according to Carroll, and she wrote this in a autobiography, and she actually didn't mention Trump by name, but it acted as a kind of Romana clef. Everyone knew it was Trump, and so on and so forth. So they were at Bergdorf, department store, fancy place, and he asked her to help him buy a present, and he said, "Oh, I want to get this woman a fur cap," and she said, "Oh, you should never put an animal on your head, and then maybe we'll do a bodysuit or something like that." One thing led to another, and Trump pushed her up against the wall and apparently digitally penetrated her. So I guess you could call this rape on some level. Now, what do I think of this? I think that E. Jean Carroll is in all likelihood being truthful. In other words, I believe her. Now, I don't believe all women or something like that. I think there certainly are many cases of lying to get revenge or so on. But I believe E. Jean Carroll. I think she's a credible person. She strikes me as a rather, she's exuberant and kind of a goofy woman, but I almost say that as a compliment. She's kind of the fun girl that you would want to talk to or be friends with or have at a party. I think she's fairly, I think not fairly, I think she's credible. I don't think she's lying. I think something like this might very well have happened. I tend to believe her. No one has firm evidence here, but I tend to believe her. I don't think she's on the warpath. Now, you could ask, why didn't she go to the police immediately afterwards? You could ask a lot of questions about that. This wasn't a rape like you would think of in, say, Central Park, where someone grabs you, knocks you over the head, and takes you behind the bushes or something like that. It wasn't nearly that violent. Perhaps in the world of Donald Trump, this kind of thing is fairly normal. He certainly makes it seem that way. He's done this to many different women. Maybe E. Jean Carroll wasn't quite sure that it was a crime. Maybe she was embarrassed by the whole thing. She didn't want to be scandalized. Maybe she had some mixed feelings herself about the matter. Maybe she felt a little guilty about being aroused by it. And I don't say that to make some kind of edgelord comment. Human sexuality is a very complicated thing. And Freud was right in many ways. We often fear what we desire, and we desire what we fear. So maybe she had some ambivalent feelings about this and didn't want to come forward. And then in retrospect, 30 years on, she's able to process it and describe it. Again, I'm not saying this in any way as a insult towards E. Jean Carroll. I think it's a very human response. But the fact is, there is no direct evidence of this. There was a legal battle about the dress that she wore. She claimed she didn't launder it, and there might have been Trump's DNA left there in some way. I don't even want to go into where that DNA would come from. But there was some deal between the plaintiffs and the defendants where they were like, well, we'll give up Trump's DNA if you show us all of the DNA that's on the dress and so on. The judge said, well, it's too late for all this. The trial has to go forward. So the jury never heard about the dress. We don't get to, reiterate the famous dress that, reminds us of another infamous episode from the 1990s. That is the Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky affair. Anyway, we don't have an actual crime. Whatever her reasons, Carroll never went to the police. We don't have any really firm evidence. What we do have evidence of is that Donald Trump is a jerk, and that Donald Trump is the kind of guy who would do something like this. We also have evidence that E. Jean Carroll is a kind of an interesting lady, and I would say credible witness. So we have evidence of that. Of that we can be sure, but we don't have any evidence of the crime. And this is the real issue of the civil suit. Again, you could file a civil suit about something that was a crime. For instance, there's a wrongful death civil suit. It's not murder in the criminal sense, but it obviously involves death. You could have a civil suit involving rape. But again, this isn't a civil suit involving rape. The statute of limitations is long past. And again, could you prove that Donald Trump did this beyond a reasonable doubt? There have been some famous rape cases in which the only evidence was the word of the victim. So you could, but I think it's very unlikely. And they're not even trying that. So it's all moot. So we have this layer above the alleged crime that is a civil suit of defamation. Now, there are different standards in civil and criminal cases. As you know, I'm sure, in a criminal case, it has to be beyond a reasonable doubt. In other words, he did it. No sensible person could dispute this. We got him dead to rights. That should be the standard for any kind of crime, whether it's a speeding ticket or whether it's murder or a sexual assault like what is being alleged. In a civil trial, the threshold they have to reach is lower. It's not a reasonable doubt. It's more like, did he probably do this? It's 51%. It's not 99% certainty. So they build a civil case on top of an alleged crime that has never really been proven. And I fear that because of this mixing of the thresholds to reach a verdict, that Donald Trump is going to be that the jury will find for the plaintiffs on the basis that they are pretty sure that Donald Trump is the type of guy who would do something like this. Now, there's another matter involving this that I think is a little bit less interesting, which is, what kind of defamation has actually occurred? What kind of damages has Carroll suffered due to Donald Trump's defaming of her? Now, again, it's not the damages that she suffered due to the alleged crime. It's the damage that she suffered from Donald Trump lying about her. Those are very different things. And we're just mixing these two and mixing the thresholds where I don't think such a case should be allowed to take place. I'm not saying this as a Trump fanboy. I'm saying this as someone who actually cares about how this kind of thing could be used in the future. Let's say that it's not Donald Trump. It's some college guy who is being accused of defaming someone for the fact that he denied that he raped her. And they have evidence that, oh yeah, they were at this frat party together. Oh yeah, they were both drinking and he was hitting on her really hard. And when she went out to get something from her car, he followed her. So it looks like he raped her. He definitely could have done it. Well, that level of evidence wouldn't really pass muster, excuse me. Wouldn't pass muster in a criminal case. Yet we are now in a situation where you could basically impugn this man's character and say, well, this is the type of frat boy, jock, asshole who would do things like this. So what are you really supposed to do in cases like this other than deny that you committed a crime? I mean, it's of course you're going to call someone a liar to some extent if they accuse you of a crime that you didn't commit. So what exactly are you supposed to do outside of risking a civil trial in which denying a criminal act is in itself defamation? I just think these things are so twisted. The whole reasoning behind this case is so convoluted that I just don't think it should ever have seen the light of day.